What's up, guys? Welcome to G Whiskey. My name is Jeff. This is a channel where I offer my thoughts and opinions on a specific whiskey, and once in a while I'll throw in other whiskey-related content. Today we're doing something a little bit different. I want to go over my top 5 15-year-old whiskeys that don't exist. Stick around. Okay, so this list is not the 5 best 15-year-old whiskeys that don't exist because you can't rank something that is not real. I guess a better way of putting it would be the top 5 15-year-old whiskeys that I wish existed. All of these whiskeys would be truly excellent if they were real. Probably. And the fun part is, all of these whiskeys could exist. Of course, that would depend on barrel stocks and budgets and businessy things. But speaking broadly, all of these whiskeys could become a reality, things that we could really buy and sip and enjoy. So there is actually a chance that one, if not more than one of these, at some point down the line will in fact become a reality. But for now, it's just wishful thinking. It's just things I'd like to see. These are all whiskeys that I feel fill a gap in their brand's lineup. Because there's quite a few brands where you'll have like a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old, and then it jumps all the way up to an 18-year-old. And usually that's more than just a jump in terms of age, but a jump in terms of price, oftentimes quite dramatic. So all of these are 15-year-olds that I feel would make a really nice addition to the lineup, and ones that I think a lot of consumers would appreciate. I certainly would. And I should specify here that I don't want any of these fictional whiskeys to be one-offs or single casks or limited editions, limited runs, none of that. I'm talking about fully fledged members of the core range. Now, of course, we do have, IBs out there, maybe some single cask offerings. That's not what I'm talking about. So yeah, as I mentioned, obviously I can't rank these in terms of my own preference or the quality because they don't exist, but I am going to rank them in terms of how excited I would get or my anticipation for them if they were to become a reality. But really, if any of these whiskeys were to happen, I'd be really excited. Also, I have a mystery pour in my glass here, which is another not real whiskey. It's a whiskey that doesn't exist yet, but could exist and would be really good. But actually, what's in my glass is a real whiskey. I'm going to pretend that real whiskey is not a real. It's not a real. So make sure you stick around after the list. I'll let you know what that is, and let's not waste time. Let's jump into our list. And in the meantime, if you could kindly leave a like down below, that'd be greatly appreciated. Okay, so we'll kick things off with number 5. This is a 15-year-old whiskey that actually officially did exist before, and it was really good, although it was a bit too premium for my taste at the time. But it was put out well before the brand revamped their line and started putting out, in my opinion, a better product. I'm talking about the Tobermory 15. So yeah, we did have this one a few years back, but the brand went full premium with it. We had our fancy box, a high price tag, all of that. So I would like to see this re-released as a much more affordable, less fancy, standard issue core range release. I think it would be a killer. Right now, we basically just have the 12-year-old and a series of special releases. A lot of these have some kind of like special cask influence. They can be a bit pricey. All of them, as far as I know, are limited runs. I think a standard 15-year-old bottling would be a really nice and interesting step up from the regular 12. Maybe like the old release, they could play around with sherry a little bit, see what that does. I'm sure it'd end up being delicious. So my number 5 pick is Tobermory 15. Alright, so my number 4 is one that I think might be really interesting, although I'm not entirely sure how this would turn out. It might be delicious, it might be really interesting, it might be really cool, or it might be kind of average. It would just be, that would depend on how the brand goes about it, but I would like to see an AnCnoc 15. AnCnoc used to have a beautiful 16-year-old whiskey. Unfortunately, that one got discontinued. Right now, what we have from them, we have a 12-year-old, which comes in at 40%. It is a very nice whiskey. I'll be reviewing it soon. But yeah, it is a bit light on the ABV. And we also have an 18-year-old. That one's 46%. It's naturally presented. Also a good one. We also have a peated line from them. We have a 24-year-old. We have some vintage releases. So we actually have a fair amount of whiskey being put out by the brand, but no standard 15-year-old. And I think that would be an interesting one. As I said, we have an 18-year-old and a 12-year-old on the go right now. The 18-year-old is sherried, whereas the 12 isn't. And if we were to get a 15-year-old, I'd probably want it to be a little bit closer to the 12 flavor-wise, as in bourbon matured, little to no sherry influence, but I would also want that craft presentation that we get with the 18. But yeah, if that could happen, if that could become a thing, I would be super interested in trying it. I think AnCnoc makes beautiful whiskey, and I think a 15-year-old would kind of fill in that gap in their current lineup. So number 4, AnCnoc 15. Okay, so my top 3, honestly, they're all pretty interchangeable. I would be giddy if I found out that any of these were actually going to become a reality. This one is a peated whiskey. It's a brand that's been making a lot of waves recently, and it's one that I know it would be really good. I want to see a Ledaig 15. I already asked for a Tobermory 15, now I'm asking for a Ledaig 15. Of course, Ledaig is distilled at the Tobermory distillery. It's their peated line. So if these things were to become a reality, they'd be pretty busy. Right now we have the 10-year-old, which is amazing. We have the 18-year-old, which is amazing. And I think a 15-year-old would be a beautiful addition, just kind of like fill that gap between those two. Right now, much like Tobermory, we do have a few limited edition releases that are often quite pricey. We also have the Sinclair series with like a Rioja, I think it's a finished whiskey. I haven't tried it, but I hear good things. Of course, we do have plenty of Ledaig IBs out there as well, but I'm thinking a standard 15-year-old release would be such a nice addition to the lineup. I'm sure it'd be delicious, and I'm sure it would sell. I think maybe we could go for a sherry touch, maybe not quite as sherry forward as the 18-year-old, but maybe just have a nice fruity element in there. Then again, I wouldn't complain if they went entirely bourbon matured. I would hope they don't use too many first fill casks, more refill casks, really let that unique distillate shine. But ultimately, any which way they would go about it, I would love to try a Ledaig 15. So that's my pick for number 3, Ledaig 15. Alright, so my number 2 pick isn't just a 15-year-old whiskey that would excite me, it would also excite you and your grandmother and your dog. It's from a brand that's basically the hottest thing in whiskey right now, and there's good reason for that. It's delicious, it's craft presented, it's affordable. I know this would be a hit if it were to happen. Arran 15. Now they do actually have a couple of 15-year-olds out right now. They're from, I think it's called the Rare Batch series. Those ones are limited runs, they're cast strength, and they're really pricey. But I would love to see a standard 15-year-old squeezed between the 10 and the 18 that are currently available. I think it would be a great follow-up to the 14-year-old that was discontinued a few years back. I would love to see what today's Arran could do with a 15-year-old. Because of course their stock is getting older every year, but beyond that, I just feel like as Arran progresses, as it evolves, it's getting better. They're just making very good whiskey as time marches on. And I think a 15-year-old would be a really interesting follow-up to the legacy left behind by the 14-year-old. I would love to see something bourbon matured, distillate driven, something that displays that bright, fresh, clean Arran profile that we all love. I'm sure it would be an epic whiskey. So number 2 is Arran 15. Okay, so my number 1 pick. This one's probably not going to be a big surprise for a lot of you. I'm sure plenty of you will have seen this one coming. This is a non-existent whiskey from one of my all-time favorite distilleries. I'm sure I would love it if it actually became a reality. I want to see a Bunnahabhain 15. The 12-year-old is one of the finest 12-year-olds out there. The 18-year-old is one of the finest 18-year-olds out there. And I haven't tried a lot of their older stuff, the 25-year-old, the 30-year-old. But as far as I'm concerned, their age-stated whiskeys are among the best in their categories, and I see no reason why a 15-year-old wouldn't follow suit. This is a brand that, of course, does very well with sherry, so a sherried 15-year-old I'm sure would be amazing. But they could also spice it up a little bit. They do have peated stock out there, so maybe a peated, sherried 15-year-old whiskey, I think that would be a really cool addition to the core range. It would add some variety to their lineup. But really, any way they go about it, I know it would be good. Aside from one truly disappointing release that we have here in Taiwan, Bunnahabhain can basically do no wrong in my book, and I would just love to see a 15-year-old from them happen. So my number 1 pick is Bunnahabhain 15. Alright guys, that's it. That's the list. I hope you enjoyed it. Of course, it is an incomplete list, so if there are any other 15-year-olds out there that don't exist, that you would like to exist, let me know what they are. Also, in terms of the whiskeys that I did include here, let me know how you would rank them in terms of your own personal excitement or anticipation. And this was a really fun list to make, and of course it was all just for fun, but all of these whiskeys genuinely would fill in a gap in their brand's lineup. And honestly, you never know. Like right now, it's a pipe dream, but maybe somewhere down the line, we'll have one, possibly more of these whiskeys become a reality. And I might do more videos in this vein down the line, just because, again, it was so much fun to do. I think probably the 15-year-old category is probably the easiest. It's the most obvious. But there are plenty of brands out there with certain gaps in their lineup. Maybe it's 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 18-year-olds. So even if it's not a 15-year-old, what is a whiskey that doesn't exist that you would like to see become a reality? Anyway, I'm sure some of you stuck around because I told you I had a glass with a mystery pour in it. And what I've got here in my glass is an imaginary 15-year-old Ardbeg. I would love to see Ardbeg come out with a 15-year-old expression. I think that would be really cool. What's actually in my glass is Laphroaig 16. Also a beautiful whiskey, one that is in fact real. But, you know, there's a couple reasons why I didn't include my imaginary Ardbeg 15 in the proper list. First and foremost is because we don't have a lot of peated 15-year-old Islas out there. We have our unpeated 15-year-old Kalila. I guess we have our Bowmore 15 out there, but there's not a lot. It's a whole can of worms. I felt like if I mentioned one, I'd probably have to mention all of them. And secondly, I think all of us know this is true. Ardbeg would not give us a fair price on a 15-year-old. They would overcharge. We rarely get higher age statements from that brand, and when we do, they're incredibly expensive. Even their no age stated special releases are always overpriced. So even if we had a 15-year-old Ardbeg, it'd be too expensive. Anyway, that's it. That's the list, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, let me know your suggestions for non-existent whiskeys that you would love to see happen. If you want to help out the channel, there's always Patreon. Otherwise, you can like, comment, and subscribe. That is always appreciated. We'll see you next time.